Good day, fellow vintage baseball card junkies. My name is Brad of Chai Sox Cardboard, and this is episode 4 of the Season in a Set project, 1965 Topps. We'll be covering cards 32 through 43 today, 12 cards, and this is the first episode in which I actually have all 12 cards. So I'm excited to be showing them off. Not all of them are in the condition that I'd like to finish the set, but I have at least a copy of each card between numbers 32 and 43. Before I get started, I did get a pickup from a card from earlier in the set, and that is card number 2, featuring Roberto Clemente and Hank Aaron, and as well as Rico Cardi, the NL batting leaders card. That's batting average, and I featured this card on one of my episodes from over the weekend. I picked this up at the Dallas Card Show over the weekend. So it was one of 3 slabbed cards I grabbed, and if you want my input on the card show, please head over and check out that Connoisseurs of Cardboard episode that I posted over the weekend. So that is card number 2. Check that one off the list. But without further ado, we'll get started on this week's cards. First up, card number 32, Herman Franks. Herman Franks played during World War II and was his career was significantly interrupted by military service. He was a catcher who played for 4 different teams in 6 different seasons. He batted .199 and totaled 23 extra base hits in 473 plate appearances. But his playing days ended with the New York Giants in 1949, for whom he played a single game on August 28th. He did get 2 hits and score a run in that last game that he played. He went on to serve as a coach and a scout for the Giants before eventually being named their manager following the 1964 season. Franks managed the Giants for 4 full seasons from 1965 to 1968, and judging by his 367 and 280 record, that's a .567 winning percentage, he was quite successful. But he is remembered more for what he did not achieve than what he did. With 4 future Hall of Famers on his roster, that was Willie McCovey, Willie Mays, Juan Marichal, and Gaylord Perry, as well as another Orlando Cepeda for a portion of his time, although Cepeda was injured for a good chunk of the overlap. Franks led his team to less than a first place finish every year. They never made the World Series during his tenure or won the pennant. Now, to his credit, the core of 4 Hall of Famers played together for 10 full seasons from 1962 to 1971 under 3 other managers, Al Dark, Clyde King, and Charlie Fox, and they only won 1 pennant. That was that first year in 1962. Later in his career, Franks returned to the Cubs organization to manage it for 2 full seasons and most of a third from 1977 to 1979. The Cubs were consistently average during his tenure, which for the Cubs was pretty good, going a combined .238 and .241. Ultimately, Franks is perhaps most remembered, true or not, for stealing signs as a coach for the Giants when Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard around the world in 1951. That story is told by Joshua Prager in the book The Echoing Green. Moving on to card 33 and Jackie Brandt. This card, if you can see down there in the bottom left, we've got a crease, or more like bottom left and center. We've got a crease in this card. So this card will need to be upgraded before I complete the set, but I do have it. Jackie Brandt, he won a Gold Glove for his outfield defense. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. He was born and raised in the great town of Omaha, Nebraska, and played 11 seasons in the majors between 1956 and 1967. He missed the entire 1957 season due to military service. He has the unusual distinction of being traded with the same player in multiple trades, first from the St. Louis Cardinals to the New York Giants in June 1956, and second from the New York Giants to the Baltimore Orioles after the 1959 season. Gordon Jones was also a part of both of those trades. Here we are. Brandt won a Gold Glove for his outfield defense with the Giants in 1959, but his best season and only All-Star selection was for the Baltimore Orioles in 1961. He was still with the Orioles in 1965, though his playing time was starting to taper off. He started 58 games and batted .243 with a perfectly league average OPS plus of 100. The best day of his season was surely a doubleheader sweep of the Detroit Tigers on May 23rd, which the Orioles won 7-3 and 8-3. Brandt started both games going a combined 4-7 with 2 walks, a home run, 5 RBIs, and 2 runs. He finished the day with a .319 batting average, which was a high watermark at any point for the remainder of his career, presuming he had more than 10 at-bats on the season at the time. All right. That is Jackie Brandt. Next up, card number 34, Cal Kuntz. I have to admit, even being a White Sox fan and so naturally disinclined to say anything good about the Cubs, I do typically really like the Cubs cards in this set. They all have the red at the bottom, and the red really matches the Cubs logo red, and just most of these cards look really good. So even though I have a tough time saying positive things about the Cubs, I can say good things about their baseball cards. Cal Kuntz was signed by the Chicago Cubs in May 1961 and made a big impact with the Major League club the following year as a rookie. At 21 years old, he started 30 games and went 10-10 for a team that finished the season a pitiful 59 and 103. 1965 was the only other season that Kuntz served primarily as a starter. His only shutout of the season came in the second game of a doubleheader on July 11th, 1965. That day, he won 6-0 against a St. Louis Cardinals team that scored the 4th most runs in the major leagues. Interestingly, the Cardinals were shut out 6-0 in the first game as well, which accounts for 2 of their 9 shutouts on the 1965 season coming on the same day. Kuntz finished the season 7-9 with a 3.69 ERA and a league average ERA plus of also exactly 100. His 2.1 WAR was the second most of his career. A little bit of interesting trivia, unrelated to Cal Kuntz, but we'll cover it here. The 1965 Cubs are tied with 7 other teams for the most triple plays turned during a season, with 3. They occurred on July 14th, July 25th, and October 3rd. Incredibly, the same pitcher was on the mound for the Cubs all 3 times, Bill Fall, who did not have a card in the 1965 top set after pitching only 5 innings for the Detroit Tigers in 1964. All 3 triple plays were of different varieties, too. On July 14th, it must have been the result of a base running gaffe by the Milwaukee Braves because it started on a pop-out to catcher Ed Bailey. On July 25th, it probably started with a double steal on a line drive to second baseman Glenn Beckert going 4-6-3. And on October 3rd, first baseman Ernie Banks snagged a line drive, stepped on first to get Gene Alley out, and threw to second to triple off Bill Mazeroski. Card 35 is Ed Charles. Ed Charles was a good third baseman, but the Braves franchise did not think him better than Eddie Matthews, and so Charles was mired in the minor leagues for nearly a decade after signing with the Boston Braves before the 1952 season. After the 1961 season, he finally got his break when the, by then, Milwaukee Braves traded him to the Kansas City Athletics. Over the next 5 seasons, plus a few games in 1967, Charles started 695 games for the Athletics at third base and 1 in left field. He batted .263, hit 65 home runs, and had 319 RBIs, accumulating a 14.5 WAR. 1965 was a fairly typical year for him, though his power numbers tapered off when the Athletics moved their fences back. Charles was traded in May 1967 to the New York Mets for Larry Elliott. He stayed with the Mets through 1969, winning the World Series with the club that year before retiring. He started 4 of 5 games in the World Series, collecting 2 hits, both in Game 2. His run in the top of the 9th in Game 2 proved to be the winning run in a 2-1 Mets victory. As many did and do, Ed Charles was known to have great admiration for Jackie Robinson. In fact, Charles is depicted as a child in the Robinson biopic 42. While Charles may not have actually put his ear to the train tracks to feel the vibrations of the train carrying Robinson to professional baseball, he did describe being awed by Robinson participating in spring training with the Montreal Royals, the Brooklyn Dodgers minor league affiliate, in his hometown of Daytona Beach, Florida in 1956. Robinson was part of Charles's inspiration to write poetry about the intersection of baseball and race, earning Charles the reputation as baseball's poet laureate. And it laid the groundwork for Charles's appearance in an iconic photograph in the moments following the Mets' first World Series victory. Show that here in a minute, or actually right now. We'll show that photograph, and then I found an interesting interview with an aging Ed Charles describing facing Satchel Paige in 1961. All right, so this is one of the most famous photographs associated with the 1969 Miracle Mets. The gentleman jumping into the catcher's arms is Jerry Koosman, the pitcher who was on the mound for the Mets at the time. Koosman had a great season. He pitched a complete game in Game 5 of the series clinching 1969 World Series. He had already won one game, so he ended up 2-0 in the World Series. The catcher is Jerry Grote, and then the third individual in the photograph is Ed Charles. They're coming in from third base to start the celebration for the 1969 Mets and their victory. You're seeing here in the photograph are just the last moments that Ed Charles spent in uniform on a Major League Baseball field as a player, because he did not come back to play in the 1970 season. So I'd be curious to know how many folks started 4 games in a World Series and then called it quits with that last game, didn't come back and play Major League Baseball ever again. But there's at least one, and that's Ed Charles. So with that, many years later, he had an interesting story to tell about facing Satchel Paige I don't think it was him facing Satchel Paige, but somebody facing Satchel Paige and laying down a drag bunt in 1961 in the Pacific Coast League when Paige was also starting to get up there in years. Here it is.
Later on, when you were with Vancouver in the Coast League, did you have a chance to face Satch when he played at the end of the year? Like, I know he played a little bit of that 61 season towards the end with Portland.
I got to share it. The last series of the 61 season, Satch was with Portland, and we was finishing up with Portland at home. And Satch was scheduled to pitch, which he did, the final game on the Sunday. And he really stuck that ball up our, until I think I got a hit off from Meseta, but he had to be about 61 years old at that time. But the big thing I remember from that was the fact that we had a second baseman called Billy Consola, right?
Okay, sure, yeah, he played in that.
Billy took it upon himself, he gonna drag bunt on Satch Paige, which he laid down the bunch, and Satch didn't attempt to go to the ball to field the ball. Satch just stood on the mound and just stared at Billy as he was running to first base, And then our fans, they took offense to Billy trying to drag on Satch. And they started booing him and saying, "You shouldn't be sent to the minor leagues. Have the guts to lay a butt down on that old man, you bush league so." So we had a lot of fun with Billy, asking him, "Why would you try to butt on that man like that, Billy?" So Billy, they said, "Well, I'm trying to win a ball game. I don't care who I don't know that name." That's what he said to us. But it was funny, the reaction of our fans towards Billy for trying to lay down a bunt, drag bunt on Satch Paige, and just to see Satch stand there and stare down Billy. I mean, that was funny.
All right. Next up is card number 36, Bobby Wine. Bobby Wine was a light-hitting, smooth-fielding shortstop of the type common in professional baseball until Cal Ripken kind of broke the mold in the 1980s. The highest OPS plus of Wine's career was a pretty pitiful 64, which he achieved each of 3 seasons between 1964 and 1966. Wine did win a Gold Glove in 1963 and still holds the National League record for most double plays turned in a season by a shortstop with 137. He set that record in 1970 with the Expos. 1965 was a pretty typical season for Wine as he started 119 games at shortstop, batted .228 with 5 home runs and 33 RBIs, and was an above-average fielder. His struggles against right-handed pitching were even more pronounced than usual, batting just .196 with a .478 OPS. He had an outstanding August, however, playing almost every day and batting .300 with 12 RBIs. Wine only had 2 multi-hit games in the season before June 30th, but 19 on or after June 30th, so he definitely improved in the second half. Card number 37 is Fred Gladding of the Detroit Tigers. Fred Gladding was born in Flat Rock, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, and legally blind in his left eye. That accounts for the glasses he wore, the fact that he was a pitcher rather than a hitter, and his signing with the Detroit Tigers, his favorite team as a child. He went on to pitch 13 seasons in the big leagues, exclusively in relief, but for a single start in 1967. That single start was the second game of an August 2nd doubleheader, in which he gave up no runs in 5 innings, but the Tigers still lost to the Orioles 2-1. In 1965, Gladding posted strong numbers, pitching 70 innings with a 2.83 ERA. But his best season was certainly in 1967, in which he set career marks for innings pitched with 77 and ERA 1.99. Proving his high value going into 1968, the Houston Astros selected Gladding as the player to be named later in a 1-for-1 trade for the aging but still future Hall of Famer, Eddie Matthews. Card number 38, Jim King. Jim King broke into professional baseball with the St. Louis Cardinals before the 1951 season at just 18 years old. But he bounced around the game for about a decade in both the major and minor leagues. He never stuck in the major leagues he never stuck in the big leagues until he was selected by the Washington Senators in the 1960 expansion draft. Over the next 6 full seasons and part of 1967, King was a platoon fixture in the Senators' outfield. A left-handed batter, King primarily played against right-handed pitchers. He grabbed headlines twice in the summer of 1964, first by hitting for the cycle on May 26th and then for hitting 3 home runs in a game on June 8th. His cycle included only 1 single, which he tried to stretch into a double, but was thrown out at second by Roman Mejias. Had he succeeded, his day would have been more statistically significant, but less historically remembered. His June 8th home runs were all solo shots and did not get the Senators to a victory, a combination which, according to Eric Roseberry of, let me get the website here, of banishedtothepen.com, had only happened 89 times as of May 2016. In 1965, King started 88 games, all in right field. Next up, card number 39, Jerry Arrigo. Arrigo debuted for the Minnesota Twins in 1961, but pitched sparingly for them until throwing 100 innings in 41 appearances, 12 of those being starts, in 1964. He's pictured here as a member of the Twins, but Arrigo had actually been traded before the season to the Cincinnati Reds. Unfortunately for the Reds, 1965 was pretty clearly the worst season of Arrigo's career. He appeared in 27 games, 5 as a spot starter for the 89-win Reds club, throwing 54 innings. By the middle of June, Arrigo was relegated to mop-up duty. On June 13th, he earned the loss in a 9-7 Chicago Cubs victory in which he pitched 1.1 innings and gave up 6 earned runs. Arrigo pitched in only 12 more games the remainder of the season, each one of which the Reds lost. His 6.17 ERA was the worst of any pitcher who appeared for the Reds in 1965. His ERA whip of 1.94 and ERA plus of 61 were all career worsts for a season in which he threw more than 15 innings. Now, while Arrigo is not a particularly memorable player for the Twins or the Reds or really any other organization, he was traded for someone who became significant to the Twins organization. On December 4th, 1964, the Twins traded him to the Reds for Cesar Tovar. Tovar played a little for the Twins in 1965, mostly as a pinch hitter and pinch runner, and was not a significant contributor to their American League pennant victory. But he was a mainstay in the Twins lineup for the next 7 years, hitting .281 for the club in 1,090 games, scoring 646 runs, and stealing 186 bases. He earned MVP votes every season between 1967 and 1971, coming closest to winning in 1967, when no one stood a chance against Carl Yastrzemski's Triple Crown winning 12.4 WAR season. In 2020, Puckett's Pond ranked Puckett's Pond ranked the Tovar trade number 4 in Twins history, behind the moves that brought Rick Aguilera and Kevin Toppany to the Twins. That was number 3. The trade that brought Francisco Liriano and Joe Nathan to the Twins, that was number 2. And the trade that brought Johan Santana to the Twins, that was number 1. Next up, card number 40, Frank Howard. At 6'7" and at least 250 pounds, and some estimates put him closer to 300 pounds, Frank Howard was one of the most physically imposing players ever to play the game, and certainly of the time period. Howard mashed for 16 seasons in the big leagues, winning Rookie of the Year in 1960, his first complete season. As of May 2023, he was one of 144 players to have at least 300 home runs and have driven in more than 1,000 runs. Pictured here as a member of the Dodgers, Howard had actually been traded to the Washington Senators in a 7-player deal on December 4th, 1964. It was there that Howard really made a name for himself, as well as accumulated some interesting nicknames like the Washington Monument and Capital Punisher. He led the league in home runs twice, with 44 in both 1968 and 1970. And in 1970, he also led the league in RBIs with 126 and walks with 132. So he actually only came up batting average short of a Triple Crown. If I recall correctly, it was a .283 batting average. I don't know what the league leader was that year, but probably .283 wasn't terribly close to the very top. He earned MVP votes in 1962 and 1965, and then finished in the top 10 for MVP voting 3 years in a row from 1968 to 1970. Almost forgot the back of the card there, but we fit it in. All right, card number 41 is our very first White Sox card, and it's not a very significant one. You'll find that all the White Sox cards are graded in decent grades, because these are part of my personal collection that I've had for 10 or 15 years, and actually, so they will all come in slightly higher grades and in conditions than the rest, or many of the rest. Pictured here are Marv Stahl, and Bruce Howard, who were both signed as amateur free agents by the White Sox before the 1960 and 1962 seasons, respectively. Howard ultimately had a greater impact in the organization, starting 63 games for the club between 1963 and 1967, going an even 25 and 25 with an impressive 2.91 ERA. 1966 was the strongest year of his career. He started 21 games and went 9-5 with a 2.30 ERA and an ERA plus of 138. He was traded to the Baltimore Orioles after the 1967 season in a transaction which brought Louis Aparicio back to the White Sox. Stahl, who was a local product born in Oak Park, Illinois, played for the White Sox in parts of 4 different seasons, but mostly as a pinch hitter and a pinch runner. He amassed only 91 plate appearances during those 4 years, spanning 53 games, starting 16. However, he did start 84 games at second base for the 1970 Montreal Expos, and batted .218, hit no home runs. The only one of his career had come the year before, and accumulated a negative .6 WAR. In 1965 specifically, Stahl batted a robust .429 for the White Sox. However, that was in only 7 plate appearances. His lone RBIs came on a 2-run pinch hit single on September 18th in an 8-5 victory over the Indians. Howard started 22 games, posting a 3.47 ERA and a 9-8 record. He gave up fewer hits per 9 innings at 7.5 than any other starter on the team, but he walked the most, 4.4 per 9 innings, by a pretty wide margin. Card number 40, what are we on? 42. Card number 42 is Earl Wilson of the Red Sox. Earl Wilson was the first black player to sign with the Boston Red Sox, which was the last franchise to integrate at the big league level. Wilson signed in May 1953 on the strength of what, according to Don Hyslop, the scouting report said this, quote, "He is a well-mannered colored boy, not too black, pleasant to talk to, well-educated, has a very good appearance, and conducts himself as a gentleman." So a fairly backhandedly racist scouting report was what brought Earl Wilson to the Boston Red Sox. Military service disrupted Wilson's minor league development, and so he did not debut in the major leagues until July 1959, just 1 week after Pumpsie Green became the first black player to play for the Red Sox in the majors. So Earl Wilson, first to sign with the Red Sox, Pumpsie Green, first to play at the big league level. Wilson played for the big league club sparingly in 1959 and 1960, and not at all in 1961. But in 1962, he began a stretch of starting 28 or more games at pitcher each of 8 straight seasons. During that period, split between the Red Sox and Detroit Tigers, Wilson went 112 and 94 with an ERA above 4.0 only once in 1964. He led the league in wins with 22 in 1967 and earned MVP votes back-to-back years in 1966 and 1967. On June 26, 1962, Wilson threw a no-hitter, beating the California Angels 2-0. All he needed that day was his own solo home run, which he hit in the bottom of the third off Bo Belinsky. Having played outfield and catcher in high school, Wilson could hit for power. The home run he hit during his no-hitter was the second of 35 in his career, 2 of which were as a pinch hitter. His 33 home runs as a pitcher puts him at 5th all-time, behind Wes Farrell, 37, Bob Lemon, 35, Warren Spahn, 35, and Red Ruffing, 34. 1965 itself was a bit of a down year for Wilson, as he was below 500 at 13 and 14, had a 3.98 ERA and 91 ERA plus. But he actually led the league in earned runs allowed with 102. His only 2 no-run performances came in May, both Red Sox victories against the Tigers. The first was a 7-inning outing on May 2nd, and the next a complete game shutout on May 16th. Wilson also hit 2 home runs himself on August 16th against the Chicago White Sox, both off Joel Horlin, but his Red Sox teammates could not carry their weight that day, and they lost 5-4. And the last card of the day, Mike Shannon, card number 43, Mike Shannon of the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, if there could only be one Mr. Cardinal, it would not be Mike Shannon, but an argument could be made to put him in the top 10 list. His entire playing career was with the St. Louis Cardinals, signing as an amateur free agent before the 1958 season and debuting for the big league club in 1960. He was a good but not great player. In his 4 seasons with 500 or more plate appearances from 1966 to 1969, he hit 12 or more home runs each time, batted .263, and averaged 57 runs and 69 RBIs. In 1968, he placed 7th in MVP voting behind 3 of his teammates, Bob Gibson, who won with an incredible 1.12 ERA, Curt Flood, and Lou Brock. Getting significant time at both third base and outfield, the metrics said he was a much better defensive outfielder. But what puts Shannon on the list of Mr. Cardinals is his postseason batting and postseason batting and post-playing broadcasting. Shannon played in all 3 of the Cardinals' 1960s World Series, and he hit a home run in each of them, having only hit 68 regular season home runs for his entire career. He batted .235 in the World Series with 12 runs and 8 RBIs. He was on the field in the 9th inning of both of the Cardinals' Game 7 series-clinching victories in right field in 1964 and at third base in 1967. After retiring from the field after the 1970 season, he joined Ford C. Frick winner Jack Buck as the voices of the Cardinals radio for nearly 30 years. And with that, Mike Shannon passed away in 2023, and one of the local news affiliates put together some of his best calls, which I think are worth a listen.
Mike Shannon's voice and style in the broadcast booth was uniquely St. Louis, and he has a number of calls in his career that will never be forgotten. Our Corey Miller counts them down.
With 50 years in the booth, Mike Shannon has been on hand for some of the biggest moments in Cardinals history. But what are his best calls? Let's look at 5. Number 5, a moment in 1999 unlike anything we'd ever seen before, since, and probably never will again.
Swing and a long one. There it is, folks. Baseball history. A second Grand Slam home run for Fernando Tatis in the 3rd inning in Los Angeles, California. Wow. Get those record books out, folks.
Number 4, Bob Forsch's second no-hitter, and still the last one we've seen in St. Louis.
Swinging a ground ball. The third baseman Overfield has it. The throw. Forsch has pitched a no-hitter. It's the first time in the history of Cardinal baseball that a pitcher has 2 no-hitters.
Number 3, the moment that left Houston speechless in the 2005 NLCS, but Shannon had just the right words.
Swing and a long one. There it is, baby. The Cardinals take the lead as Albert Pujols comes through in the pit. And the Redbirds lead this baby 5-4.
Number 2, my personal favorite, a Kerry Wood brushback and ensuing Pujols bomb on Independence Day 2003 sends Shannon into a frenzy. Take a ride on that one, big boy.
Swing and hello, 4th of July. Take a ride on that knockdown pitch, big boy. Say, take a little whiff of that, big boy. Give it to him, big boy. Give it to him.
And number 1, pure elation on perhaps the most unexpected play in Cardinals history, thanks to a third-string catcher and his daring dash.
Brummer stealing home. He is safe and the Cardinals win. Brummer stole home. The dugout comes out and they congratulate him. You wouldn't believe it.
So raise a cold, frosty one to the Moon Man and his timeless calls that filled our St. Louis summers.
I love longtime broadcasters. It's one of my favorite things to do, at least when it comes to consuming baseball content, is to listen to some of those longtime broadcasters and their best calls. I love it. My childhood and into early adulthood are filled with Hawk Harrelson calls for the Chicago White Sox. Maybe when we get to his card in the 400s, I will pause there for some great Hawk Harrelson calls. That's Ken Harrelson is his card in the 1965 season, but he typically went by his nickname Hawk. Maybe in another life I could be a baseball announcer. I don't know that I have the pedigree to start that as a second career in this life, unfortunately. All right. So last, we'll cover a few days in the 1965 season. It'll be the April 19th, 20th, and 21st. Jackie Brandt started in the Orioles' 7-2 loss to the White Sox on April 19th, 1965, going 1 for 3 with a double and a walk. Jim Palmer, in his first year in the big leagues, although his rookie card is in the 1966 set, pitched in relief, and Tommy John got the win with a 7-inning, 2-run outing. The Kansas City Athletics beat the New York Yankees 8-2, and every Athletics hitter except catcher Doc Edwards got a hit, including pitcher David Segui, who threw a complete game, hit a double, and scored a run. The Senators played the Red Sox in the only American League game of the day on April 20th, 1965. The Red Sox got all they needed on a grand slam by Felix Mantilla in the first inning and went on to win 5-2. Jim King, who we covered today, did not start, but he did pinch hit in the 8th, fouling out off of Dave Moorhead. Frank Howard had 2 singles on April 21st, 1965, both times moving Woody Held to third base and both times watching the inning end on a Don Locke groundout. The Senators lost to the Baltimore Orioles 3-2 in 11 innings, and that was the first of a number of extra inning games that day. The Chicago White Sox also won in 11 innings, 3-1 over the Boston Red Sox. John Buzzhart pitched 10 innings, and Bill Monbuquette pitched all 11 for the Red Sox, losing on 2 unearned runs when Bill Skowron homered with 2 outs in the top of the 11th to drive in Danny Cater, who had reached on an error by Gary Geiger. The Cleveland Indians also won in extra innings, 10 innings, 6-5 over the California Angels. Hank Aguirre and Larry Sherry of the Detroit Tigers shut out the Kansas City Athletics 1-0. Over in the National League on April 19th, Jim Bunning blanked the Houston Astros with a 5-strikeout, 5-hit shutout, and the Phillies won 8-0. Jim Maloney of the Cincinnati Reds also had a shutout, and the for the Reds, shutting out the Milwaukee Braves 2-0. On April 20th, the New York Mets beat the Los Angeles Dodgers 3-2 with Warren Spahn pitching a complete game. The Philadelphia Phillies beat the Astros 2-1 in 13 innings on Ruben Amaro's walk-off single, scoring Cookie Rojas. And the Pittsburgh Pirates beat the San Francisco Giants 3-1. Roberto Clemente contributed 2 RBIs on 2 singles to take a half-game lead in the National League. Mike Shannon wasn't yet an everyday starter in 1965, but he did get a cameo appearance in the Cardinals' 6-3 win over the Milwaukee Braves on April 21st. He was a defensive replacement for Tito Francona in the top of the 8th, but recorded no outs and did not bat. Willie McCovey's 2-run homer powered the San Francisco Giants to a 3-2 win over the Pittsburgh Pirates. Finally, the Houston Astros scored in double digits for the first of only 7 times in 1965, beating the Philadelphia Phillies 11-4. Joe Morgan, Walt Bond, and Bob Lillis each had 3 hits in the win. And with that, on April 21st, at the end of the day, the Minnesota Twins were in a virtual tie with the Detroit Tigers in the American League pennant race. The Twins were 4-1 and the Tigers were 5-2. They were half a game ahead of the Red Sox and the White Sox. The Washington Senators, Baltimore Orioles, and Kansas City Athletics were bringing up the lower portion of the standings. As I mentioned, in the National League, the Reds had taken a half-game lead over the Dodgers at 5-2. The Dodgers were 4-2, and the Pittsburgh Pirates were also half a game back at 5-3. The Cubs and Phillies were 4-3. The San Francisco Giants were 4-4, and the Braves, Mets, Astros, and Cardinals were in the lower half of the standings, with the Cardinals bringing up the rear on the heels of their World Series victory in 1964, getting off to a 2-5 start in 1965. And that takes us through card number 43 in the 1965 Season in a Set project. I finally got through 12, I guess my first episode I got through 12 cards, and then I tapered off and finally got back up to 12. I need to be averaging 12, 13, 14 cards per episode in order to hopefully get this project finished in this calendar year with approximately 1 episode per week. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Please feel free to leave any comments with your input or corrections or any other anything else your heart desires. Thanks for watching, and as always, collect what you love, flip what you like.